Yeah, so what we do in the enterprise team is we kind of work with the various stakeholders. These could be large financial institutions, these could be policymakers, these could be large technology companies, and the various different kind of like institutions that are exploring basically blockchains and digital assets. In this talk in particular, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually talk a bit about the foundation itself, because I think this is something that a lot of people kind of don't quite understand how it works and how it's organized, and then kind of dig into a bit more about basically what my team does. So I think one thing that is kind of interesting about the Ethereum Foundation is that we are a non-profit, but I think more so than that, we work on the core protocol, but the way that we see ourselves is more as a steward of the ecosystem, not like a controlling force. We don't control the chain, we can't turn it off. We really act as like a guiding force where we help protocol builders, we help design and kind of like advocate for the roadmap, and act essentially as a facilitator of the Ethereum ecosystem. We're not the ecosystem, we're just one of the many participants there. And our goals really can lie in maximizing the people that benefit from Ethereum's underlying values, and to also maximize the technical and social resilience of the network. And as part of that, my team in particular, what we do is that when we work with institutions, we kind of talk about their use cases, understand their problems, and what we found is that the most amount of value they get from us is essentially as an enabler. Oftentimes, institutions are already quite technical and adept, and where they need help is really just like strategic guidance and advice. So in this case, what will happen is that, one example of this would be like, for example, privacy. So if you're a large financial institution, oftentimes one of the biggest blockers for you from moving onto a public chain like Ethereum would be kind of like the privacy concerns, the KYC, the AML, the various different kind of tooling and technologies that allow you to kind of move on a public chain and retain the kind of privacy guarantees that you're used to. This is an area that actually I think most institutions may not have kind of like the depth of knowledge or expertise that, for example, the foundation has. One area, for example, that the foundation kind of differentiates itself is that we have like a 50-person cryptographic research lab that has been building cryptography protocols and research for over 7 years. This makes us quite different to many other, I suppose, foundations in the space. And we're able to kind of leverage this expertise and kind of help guide institutions. So kind of going back to the kind of the key drivers that really help people in the space, it's enablement, like finding out where they need help. If they're launching an L2, what does it look like? Do they need ecosystem partners? Advice, if they're interested in privacy, ZK, FHE, TEEs, we can kind of help out there. And broadly as a connector of the ecosystem. So the EF sits in kind of like a very special place, being like a neutral, incredibly neutral entity within the ecosystem, and it allows us to pull together all the various kind of like protocol teams and actors in the space. This could be all the various different L2s. This could be like the various different DeFi protocols. And by being able to do that, we can really kind of help a lot of these large enterprises kind of adopt Ethereum as a core technology stack. So I think a good thing to do here would be like to look back at why and how enterprises look at the network. So like if you are and this is a good point to talk about how these like underlying Ethereum values translate to essentially economic and business values. So like if you are a large enterprise, you probably have some kind of SLA with a technology provider, let's say Amazon, where you're expecting something like 99.6% uptime. With all the development and kind of the design of the underlying Ethereum protocol, we've been up for over 10 years since the first block was mined with 100% uptime. We also kind of offer the largest economic security, so over $150 billion worth of staked ETH makes us the most expensive smart contract platform to build on, and the most decentralized. So we have the largest number of different validators and client diversity. And from an institutional point of view, this essentially translates to things like uptime, no counterparty risk. As I said before, we can't switch off the network. There's enough diversity and decentralization that they're confident that basically no one really controls what the network does. And if you are a organization that's potentially going to be putting billions, if not trillions of dollars of assets on chain, this ends up being like a requirement to be on a public blockchain. And finally, again, this goes back to the last one, which is credible neutrality. It's incredibly important that basically we maintain the neutrality and we do not favor any particular protocols in the ecosystem, as that is, I think, like one of our extremely, like, really core values and things that we often kind of find challenging because protocols teams and many organizations will come to us for endorsement, but it's something that we call really quite close to our hearts. So talking about translating technical values into economic and business values, here's a chart I've taken RWA.xyz. If anyone's not familiar with it, it's definitely a good place to look at when you're looking at tokenization on chain, and you'll see that there's essentially a J curve here. So exponential increase in the number of like RWAs in chain. TVL has taken a huge increase. And by the way, this is almost $30 billion. It doesn't include stablecoins. If it did, it would be 10 times larger. And you can see there's like real adoption here. Like in a big way, institutions are moving on chain. And kind of digging into that a bit, double tapping, we have BlackRock here. So one thing that we'll probably see, especially this week, we'll talk to many different protocols and talk to kind of like all these different companies that are doing like radical new things. But what we find is that a lot of institutions, like this Biddle fund, is essentially taking traditional assets and it's not doing some new radical DeFi type instrument here or kind of new security. It's taking a very traditional asset and putting it on blockchain rails. And even that we find to be extremely valuable. If you take a look at this, you can see, for example, the various different chains, over 90% is on Ethereum, and then you have basically every other kind of ecosystem. As part of that ecosystem, I think what makes us extremely compelling for institutions and enterprise, which is kind of where we sit, is the fact that L2s are a very core part of our ethos. We have the L2-centric roadmap for a reason. L2s allow various different players to customize kind of like the Ethereum ecosystem to their needs. There's 106 different L2s. There's more launching almost every other week. It allows you to essentially have, like, for example, the control that you look for, the compliance requirements that you need in your jurisdiction, or could be like a application-specific goal that you're trying to achieve. And the ecosystem has been flourishing. We've seen the likes of Robinhood creating their own L2. We've seen many different other kind of players in the space, as you can see. And that in itself has achieved like huge success. Over $1.1 trillion are locked between all the various different L2s. And obviously daily DEX volume is incredibly high. So we're extremely supportive of L2s. They are part of the ecosystem. We find that in terms of the way that we think about it, the L1 really provides economic security, and L2s provide a place for execution. Ethereum is the home of tokenization. We just took a look at some of the growth in RWAs. We mentioned stablecoins. Over 90% of tokenization takes place on Ethereum or its L2s. The DeFi ecosystem is 10 times larger than the next largest ecosystem. And with the home of privacy, like I said, I don't think there's any other foundation that has an entire cluster dedicated to that cryptographic research in the way that we have. And what we found is that it's been like extremely important for governments, for policymakers, for the largest investment banks and asset managers in the world. We provide auditability, like how do you do this in an auditable way for compliance reasons. We help look at transaction settlement reference patterns and basically privacy building blocks. Privacy is a key consideration for any large institution. Institutions, this is a very small, incredibly small selection of organizations that are building on Ethereum, whether on an L2 or on the main chain itself. And with that said, we're here to help. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me.